right, welcome to a whole new episode of the Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show. I'm Dan LaForest. That is Baylin Trujillo. Baylin, we have kicked off the 2023 season. Kickoff classics have been done. Hey, let's start talking some football.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be back. It's a new season, new opportunities, new players, new teams on the rise. It's usually the same top out 4 or 5 teams week in and week out. But I'm excited again. Another great year. Kickoff Classics was amazing. We have obviously transfers all over the place. You know, that's a whole different type of conversation that we've all talked about, and it's so evident. So it's nothing that we really need to get into. But teams look different, and I'm really excited to cover these guys this year and see who's ready to compete for state.
Man, this show has evolved. 9 years ago, Heath Ziegler started this thing on ESPN Radio now. Now we've got video. Now we're on YouTube. And I tell you what, we're excited. There's going to be a lot to kind of get into, but we're going to start off with a Kickoff Classic recap from last week. So let's get into that. And let's start with 5 big games. West Orange dropping to DeLand, 42-21, Baylin.
Yeah, this was a great game. You know, this is a matchup I was definitely looking forward to seeing how the new quarterback transfer, Jack Riley, was going to establish himself. He has only been there about a month at West Orange. So to see what he's doing in the last month, I was really excited to see that. DeLand, obviously, Coach Darlington's second year in the program. He's always established something early, and, he won a lot of games last year, but I think this year is going to be a breakout year for DeLand. They're definitely one of the teams to watch out for. They put it on a good West Orange team. Jack Riley didn't play pretty much the entire second half because of cramping, full body cramps. The weather's a little different here in Florida than it is up there in Chicago, but he had a pretty decent half, threw a couple touchdowns, also a couple of key interceptions that DeLand capitalized off of with TJ Moore quarterback. He ran all over West Orange and looked like a phenom. So this game was a little out of reach. The score was probably a lot bigger than the game actually was. Again, Jack Riley didn't play the entire second half. That's their new quarterback at West Orange that took over Trevor Jackson, who transferred to Jones. But again, I look forward to West Orange bouncing back when it counts this week against my alma mater, Oak Ridge High School.
And talk about Javon Ross, that speedy wide receiver for DeLand, had 3 scores. DeLand, Rick Darlington, year 2. I tell you what, DeLand's going to be on everybody's radar, and if they're not, they need to be worried about that sleeper. Let's talk about Lake Mary, 31-17 over Bishop Moore.
Yeah, the crazy stat line here was the game was 31-3 going into the fourth quarter. Lake Mary dominated the football game. Noah Grubbs, as everybody knows, a quarterback that I train, a guy that's been working in the offseason, a guy that's blown up in the recruiting. Everybody's watching what he's doing now. Lake Mary has so much talent coming back from a great season last year, knocking off Seminole, using that momentum going into this year. And they put on Bishop Moore, and Bishop Moore's a solid football team as well. They're no slouch over, and they're number 1 in our rankings for the private schools, but they're just too big. The Rams are just way too physical for Bishop Moore, and they did get a couple touchdowns late. But again, that score was 31-3 at one point, then ended up 31-17. Bjorn Jensen, the quarterback that transferred to Bishop Moore from Dr. Phillips, looked for him to have a really big year this year. I'm excited about what he can do and what he can bring to the Hornets offense. To see a little bit more of the spread type is something we're not used to, where they're running the triple option or the speed option. So look forward to seeing how their offense evolves throughout the year. But yeah, Lake Mary, Noah throws 3 touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown to start the game. Threw 2 interceptions, though. We got to, minus those interceptions. But other than that, looked pretty well in 3 quarters. And again, led to the blowout victory varsity-wise. And then the game was closer than it looked. Dan, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I tell you what, you also have to take a look at Trenton Gummer, coming over from Lake Highland Prep over to Bishop Moore, had 2 interceptions. But, you talked about Noah Grubbs, but you have to start with also 2 great wideouts that he has, and Caden Harshbarger and also Logan Cook. They're going to make life a lot easier for them. I think the biggest thing, again, we have to take a look at Lake Mary is what do they run that ball? And, one thing about Kickoff Classics that I love to point out is don't get caught up in the scores. We don't know how the game was formatted. We don't know how much time varsity had on the field. This is just a good talking point. But, it's still 0-0. Everybody's looking for their first win, and we're going to talk about that later in the program. Let's talk about Apopka just getting by at Osceola. And as I understand it, that was a last-minute field goal by Osceola that was a miss. Apopka wins 16-15.
Yeah, that's your alma mater, man. I have really high expectations for Apopka this year. Every year, of course, we talk about this all the time. Everybody writes them off in the first 4 games because they have such a tough schedule early on, and they lose these games kind of sometimes close. And then all of a sudden they go on an 8-game win streak, find themselves in the state title game and competing for state and have good chances of winning those games. So Apopka, this was a shocker for me. You know, if we would have done a prediction segment, I'm not going to lie, I'd have probably picked Apopka to win by 21. I didn't see much of what Osceola has to offer based off, you know, obviously spring game against Edgewater. They look pretty flat. Obviously, their top running back, one of the top running backs in the entire country, did not play in this game. So I thought Apopka was going to easily roll with this. But, man, I'll tell you what, Osceola defense is sound. They play sound football. They don't make many mistakes. And, you know, they capitalize on a lot of the things that Apopka didn't do well in this football game, which gave them the early 7-3 lead pretty much the entire first and second half until the fourth quarter when Apopka ran away with it a little bit with Tyson Davison scoring the rushing touchdown and then the missed 30-yard field goal for the win for Osceola. But this would have been a big shocker for this game if Osceola would have won that football game. But you know what? It gives Osceola a lot of momentum going into a tough 4-game stretch here coming up. So I would love to see how they get out of this gauntlet early on. Treasure Coast is no slouch. You know, they week one is Treasure Coast, then they go to Seminole. So if you really want to prove yourself, Osceola, this is your chance. But, man, you looked really, really good against Apopka. And, again, we have a lot of high hopes for Apopka. They're top 5-4 football team in this area. So look for them to bounce back and make a statement in week one.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Apopka in the state championship 3 of the last 4 years. Still looking for that win, but you can't count out the Blue Darters. But Osceola, again, a lot to prove coming up in the season. Let's talk about Seminole Edgewater. Everybody's been waiting for this the last few years. Seminole comes out 17-6.
Big shocker here. I was shocked. I would have not predicted this. I have been following Edgewater really closely. Obviously, Seminole's a talented football team. They are well coached. They got a lot of coaches, but so is Edgewater. Edgewater is actually ranked nationally, I believe, in the top 30 in the country. And this was a shocker. You know, they looked so good, so polished in the first, quarter and a half against Osceola in the spring game. Michael Clayton goes down with an injury, so he didn't finish the rest of that second half, but they were up 24-0 on a good Osceola football team in the spring. Yeah, spring we don't really look heavily into because the people are playing kids, see what they can do. But at the end of the day, Edgewater dominated that football game. And I've been watching them closely throughout the summer, and Michael Clayton coming back fully healed. I thought this game was going to be a little bit maybe on the reverse side of it. With this same score, tight football game, great defense. But I thought Edgewater would have squeaked this one out. So Seminole really showing themselves they're still around. They're still elite. They're still great. They got Carson from Lake Highland Prep, which obviously is an addition to them at the quarterback position. But, key stat here, David Parks, it was his show in the spring game. And now headed into the game, he started the football game and ran an 80-yard touchdown the first play of the game on a quarterback draw. So, they're going to do a dual quarterback system here at Seminole. I think it's going to work quite well. It's kind of similar to what they did with Luke Rucker and Carson when he was there a couple years ago and playing, series here, series there. And if the momentum's going a certain way, maybe they switch it out. But it's going to be interesting to see how both these teams go out the season. Edgewater's still a top team in the city, obviously. But Seminole really made a statement here, which is why you might see them move up in our rankings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, going back, Edgewater, I think, is one of the most well-rounded teams in Central Florida, offensively, defensively. We saw that in the spring. Again, we don't know what the format was for this game, but you're right. I think that X factor for the Noles this year is going to be David Parks because you don't know where he's going to line up. They could put him out wide. They could run him at H-back. He can run out of the quarterback position. I think they have a lot of diversity, not to mention they have a lot of Power 5 kids on that team. So let's move on to the big game, the Battle of the Cats. A lot of people were looking forward to seeing this in Camping World Stadium. I called this game on Quick Cuts. Jones just flat out put it on Jesuit 38-18.
Yeah, I talked to Elijah Williams right after the game. He called me. I talk to him pretty much every week, but every time after a game, he calls me, lets me know his thoughts. And, honestly, he told me it could have been a lot worse, Dan. You were there. I was on a Disney cruise with my son and my wife, so I didn't get to watch this game at all. But he told me they left a lot of points on the board, and it was like 38-14, I believe, or 38-7 at some point in the football game. I think Jesuit scored kind of late there in the game with JV on the field, according to Coach Will. That's funny. But man, this was shocking. I'm gonna be honest with you. When I saw this score on Twitter, when I got a chance to look at my phone, I was like, "Is this a typo?" Because they were up big, and I'm thinking, "No, man," because honestly, I thought Jesuit may have been the better football. This is just from an opinion based, but I would have probably picked Jesuit close because I know Coach Elijah Williams takes spring games and kickoff classics like kind of an evaluation or a tryout for some of these guys that he doesn't know that might actually help him in the season longevity-wise. But, he wanted to win. And Darion Coleman, the freshman quarterback, a guy that I've worked with in the past, this kid's elite. And he's a sophomore. He started the game actually over Trevor. He ran the first series, and guess what they did? They went right down and scored. And so he threw 5 total touchdowns in 6 drives. I think that's pretty impressive. They went series for series with Trevor Jackson, who's still learning the offense, still learning the signals, trying to still get comfortable. But, man, Darion Coleman put on a show, Dan, for you and for the entire audience to let them know that 2026 class is elite. And Darion Coleman might solidify himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the country just based off that 5-touchdown performance in itself.
No doubt about it. And I tell you, Jesuit struggled a little bit, but Jones looked good on offense and on defense. They controlled the tempo of the whole game. But I will note this.
There is a player that you have to look out for, though. Vernell Brown, the transfer from Wildwood. That kid is elite, caught 2 touchdowns. What are your thoughts about him?
No, listen, he was all over the field. He did a great job returning kicks, explosive returning punts. I loved him at the wideout position. Darion Coleman, Trevor Jackson split time. I thought both of them played very well. But the defense and offensive line, people aren't talking about how well Jones ran that ball against a very tough Jesuit defense. They've got a couple Power 5 kids on that defensive line, but the kicking game, they missed 2 extra points. And I think that's something the Tigers need to work on, especially going into the first part of the season. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we have a new top 10 going into week 1. You're watching the Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show, and we'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back to the Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show. I'm Dan LaForest. That's Baylin Trujillo. Baylin, let's get right into the Week 1 Top 10. And we're going to start off with Jones at number 1, Mainland number 2, Seminole now at number 3, Edgewater 4, Cocoa at number 5, Apopka 6, Lake Mary 7, Lake Mineola at 8, Olympia at 9, and Wekiva at 10.
Yeah, that's a pretty good list. Obviously, if you watched what we did last week, we put out a preseason top 10 based off, what we've known from the spring game, obviously some of the transfers that went through the summer and then how they've been, doing 7-on-7s and summer camps. But, looking at it now, Seminole has moved themselves up to number 3. They were at number 17. We bumped a couple teams down. Obviously, Apopka coming out of the top 4 there. Cocoa remains at 5. Those are really the only 2 or 3 switches that we made. Jones solidified themselves at number 1. I was very curious to see how they played against Jesuit. Obviously made a statement. So those are pretty much our top 10. The team to look out for, or I would say teams to look out for that might slip in the cracks is Osceola, depending on how well they play against Treasure Coast, leading up to maybe a top 10 team matchup against Seminole in week 2. And also DeLand. We just talked about DeLand in our recap. I think that's one team that you're going to really have to watch closely. They have not a favorable schedule, but if they can go and pop Mainland in the first game in week 1, they're going to solidify themselves right there, maybe at the top of the list, because I know Darlington's going to be well coached. I know that TJ Moore's going to have another 1,000 yards rushing and passing. So it's going to be curious to see. But these top 10 teams, I really want to focus on. Olympia, they're right there. I was not really impressed with their 14-0 win over Boone, and both their touchdowns were from a transfer from Lake Highland Prep and Romello Ware. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get all those transfers to work together and kind of mesh and have chemistry. Wekiva, honestly, is another sleeper. They are our top 10 team at number 10. They've looked really good against Buchholz in Gainesville. They actually should have won that game. They were dominating the game. Tyree Davis, committed recently to, I believe, somewhere in North Carolina A&T. He had 400 passing yards and 4 touchdowns in that football game. He did the same thing pretty much against Seminole, who we now know is a legit team. So be careful for Wekiva. They have a couple good opponents early on the schedule as well that can really solidify themselves as one of the top programs in Central Florida, or could just be another team that has a lot of hype, and we'll see how it all folds. But these are our top 10 teams. I'm excited about Lake Mary. They have a good test against Dr. Phillips, who I was really shocked and how they played against Lake Mineola, which is great for Dr. Phillips. That has a lot of momentum going into this football game. So it's going to be curious to see how Lake Mary plays at home this season starting off. And then Lake Mineola, like I just mentioned, they have one of the hardest schedules I've ever seen. We always pick on them for having an easy schedule. But now this year, if you look at their schedule, Lake Manoa is going to have to prove themselves to show why they're beating teams 60 or 70 to nothing. So it's going to be very interesting to see. That's why they're kind of at the lower half. They got to prove themselves as well. But you can't go wrong with Jones, who made a statement. You can't go wrong with Baylin, who has pretty much arguably the best transfers to come into a program and has all the top talent on the East Coast. And then Seminole making that statement against Edgewater, who's now at number 4. Edgewater, let's see how you respond in the Battle of College Park against our number 1 ranked private school ranking team, Bishop Moore, this week. I think they're going to respond just fine. But those are our top teams. Then obviously, let's not even forget about Coco Jones. That's going to solidify whether Coco should move up in the rankings. Could take the number 1 spot depending on how big if they win that game. But we'll go over our prediction segments later, Dan. But man, we're excited about this top 10. What are some of the teams that stick out to you?
Well, I tell you, I think we have to talk more about Mainland. We'll talk about it in the next segment. You've got LJ McCray, Eliza Shine, just to name a couple of their key players. But let's not forget, they were knocking on the door. They were only a score away from winning or going to the state championship. And
no, they were in the state championship.
Winning the state championship.
They were, yeah.
Coco won the 2 West state championship. Coco returns a lot of talent. But they got a young man at quarterback that you know a little bit about, Brady Hart. We'll talk about him. But again, I like this top 10. But the key thing to understand here is early on in this schedule, a lot of these teams play each other. We're going to see this thing shuffle around quite a bit here in the first few weeks. But let's talk about those private schools, the top 5. You talked about Bishop Moore. How about number 2, Masters Academy?
Yeah, Masters Academy. Coach Kruzik has that team rolling. He's only been in 2 games with them. In their first game, they won 70-7. And then they just won this past week against a good Windermere Prep team, 42-2. Only gave up a safety, and that was their only score. Look for this team to roll offensively. They obviously has his dad, who was a former UCF offensive coordinator and head coach, and Coach Mike Kruzik. He is now the OC at Masters Academy. He's got a bunch of NFL guys that are coaching at these positions. So it's really amazing to see what Masters Academy is going to do. They've historically been a solid private school program. A team that I worked really close with over the last couple of years when Jermel Jones was there, even with Wes Allen, and now obviously Coach Kruzik is there, and also Bailey, who just left. So I've had really good relationships with those guys, so I know what goes along in those walls, and there's some pretty special talents there. So look for them to score a lot of points. I'm going to be honest with you. I think they're going to win the SSAC this year, and I don't think it's going to be close, Dan. I know it's a crazy early prediction, but based on what I've seen and the talent they have there, and Nazir at quarterback, along with Jackson Stetcher, who's an 8th grader who's going to be a phenom as well, it's going to be crazy to see how Masters Academy does at number 2.
No doubt about it. Then you got Foundation at number 3. Coach Andre Walker brings back a bunch of good kids. JT Bronow is one heck of a little back and showed us a lot last year, and he's only gotten bigger and stronger.
Yeah, and Michael Dove, the quarterback transfer from Horizon. He was a freak last year for Horizon. He ends up transferring to Foundation in a spread offense, kind of getting away from that triple option. And now he's going to showcase his talent to run the ball and also throw it, which he's good at. So look for Michael to have a great breakout season and light it up, just like he did in the spring game, 42-0 in his first debut as Foundation Lion.
Number 4, OCP. OCP back in the top 5. Coach D comes back with not a big skill set, what we're used to seeing out of OCP.
Yeah, and they just got Boone transfer quarterback Cameron Curzon. He's now there at quarterback. They beat Freedom in their Kickoff Classic, which is a public school, a big public school, and they beat them 17-0, blanketed them. So, OCP is always known for making deep runs in the playoffs, having special talent, well-coached football team. So I'm curious to see now with kind of a spread look, because they're used to obviously the wing tee offense. Now they're going to go throwing the ball a little bit more to see how their athletes do in space, catching the ball. So I'm really curious to see how their offense transforms over the year. But look for OCP to make another run. They're in they're in a tough conference and they play some good competition. So I'm really curious to see how they do and finish the year. But they're going to come in at number 4 ranked early on.
And number 5, you got First Academy. New head coach Jeff Conaway comes down from Arkansas. Has kind of changed the culture a little bit.
Yes, he has. And I'm so excited about this only because now they're throwing the ball. We've never seen TFA throw the ball. It's been 15 years that coach has been there. And, now to finally see them throwing the rock around, there's a lot of talent that's been through TFA. A lot of guys go to play college football at high programs. And obviously more your running backs, but now we're going to see the talent at receiver, DBs, and all that. So I'm very excited. Obviously the quarterback position, Brooks Tolt, he's the new quarterback there. So I'm really excited to see how his season goes. But yeah, TFA, they struggled a little bit in their Kickoff Classic, which is expected, but they made a really good comeback in the second quarter when they were down big, made it close before they put in the JV for the second half. They lost 25-20, down 25, I believe, nothing, or 25-7. Made a little deep run there to end the half with some momentum going into the season. So look for TFA to make a run there. They come at number 5, but they're going to have to prove themselves with their new head coach.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to come take a quick water break. When we come back, we're going to get into week 1 predictions with the top 5 games that we're looking at. You're watching the Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show, and we'll be back right after this. All right, you're welcome back to the Central Florida High School Scoreboard Show. I'm Dan LaForest. That's Baylin Trujillo. We have got some big games, and I got the wrong slide up. Let's add this back up, and let's start with the big game, Baylin. The Battle of the Tigers. Cocoa comes to Orlando, plays Jones. This was a big game last year. This is round 2. State champion and a number 1 team in Jones.
This is the statement that Cocoa needs to make right here. If they want to solidify themselves, that, a lot of coaches are reaching out to me, and a lot of, Twitter talk and a lot of Instagram talk when we release our top 10s, which, by the way, there's a whole committee that does this stuff. So before you guys all get on me, we always discuss, we always break these teams down, but I'm excited about these 2 teams. If Cocoa wants to make a statement, led by 2026 quarterback Brady Hart, who I train, who's now taking over the realms of Blake Boda, who lit it up last year, made record-setting state championship run, all the 9, got the big rings. You want to repeat, you're going to have to beat a team like Jones to start your season. I love this matchup. This is a top 10 matchup early on. Look for Jones to capitalize on what we saw last week. I want to see if Trevor Jackson can really get comfortable in this new offense with Coach Elijah Williams and learn signals, because guess what? He's 1 play away from Darion Coleman taking over this thing. Darion proved himself last week against Jesuit, throwing 5 touchdowns. So Jones is going to come out strong. I look for Cocoa to obviously be good defensively, offensively, and special teams. Jones has got to work on their extra point kicking game, because I believe they're going to score a lot of points. Dan, what's your thoughts on this game?
No, I do. I think this is a great quarterback showcase. Love Trevor Jackson, love Darian Coleman, but Brady Hart is somebody nobody's really talked a whole lot about. And like I said, you're training some. I saw him in some 7-on-7s during the summer. He's a very big, mature young man, especially for somebody of that 2026 class. I think it's going to be exciting if you're a lover of watching passing football. But I think both teams are going to have to run the ball against both of these defenses. I think we're not talking about really the defensive side of the ball, where I think both of these teams are really going to be battling.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Jones replaces a lot of their key pieces they missed last year. But I do look forward to this football game. We will be covering this game. I'll be on the sidelines. And I'm actually going to make our first prediction of the 2023 season, Dan. And I'm going with the Tigers. But which one? Tigers. I think Jones Tigers runs away with this game. I believe it's close early. I believe they're going to finish the game winning 35-21. I just believe that Jones is just too well coached. They have all the talent. I mean, Cocoa is obviously a well-coached football team. Coach Snyder is the man when it comes to offense. Obviously, he knows how to work the quarterback position. Brady Hart's going to have a great game. It's going to be his first game in live action. I'm excited about that because I haven't seen him play live at all, only just training him. But I'll tell you what, Jones is something special. And Coach Elijah Williams, I'll never bet against him. So I'm taking the Tigers at Jones. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm looking for the Tigers to win. So I'm not big on predictions, man. You know that. I love good games, and that's what we're going to see here on Friday night. All right, how about Mainland travels to DeLand and takes on Rick Darlington's Bulldogs?
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup here. Obviously, DeLand is a great football team. We just talked about that. TJ Moore, he's going to light it up, I believe. And Mainland, the number 2 ranked team in Central Florida right now. And I believe this game right here is going to prove both teams right. Either DeLand's really the real deal, or Mainland is the number 2 team in Central Florida, arguably number 1 with all the transfers. So I'm looking for a good game. I think it's going to be close because, obviously Coach Rick Darlington loves to control the clock. I believe he's going to control this really well. Again, I look forward to TJ Moore having another spectacular game on the ground and in the air. So it's going to be curious to see. And again, the Bucs have a lot to prove to really make a statement here, and this is how you do it. What's your thoughts on this game, Dan?
Yeah, I tell you what, the matchup I want to see is Javon Ross, the wide receiver for for DeLand against Isaiah Shine. One of the top corners in the state of Florida. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup to look at. So we'll wait and see what happens Friday night. But that is definitely one of the games that we're going to have an eye on.
I'm going to go with the first upset of the year, and I'm actually going to go DeLand Bulldogs in this matchup. I think they take care of business, and I think they win, Dan. So this is going to be interesting. Again, Mainland is the real deal. Don't get me wrong. If I'm wrong with his prediction, I'll live with it because Mainland's the real deal. But I think the way Coach Darlington has his football team playing right now with TJ Moore, I think this upset can happen, and I believe we're going to witness it on Friday night.
We're going to find out real quick. How about the Battle of College Park? Bishop Moore goes across the street to play Edgewater.
Well, I'll tell you what, Edgewater has a statement to make because last week's Kickoff Classic against Seminole, that was tough for them to go through. But Bishop Moore, obviously they play Lake Mary. They're about to see a whole different caliber of football team with Edgewater. So if they really want to make a statement to prove themselves, this has been a lopsided rivalry here, and it's been Edgewater every single year when they play each other. So I'm very curious to see how they respond. Dan, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think, again, I think Edgewater's got a very well-rounded team. Bishop Moore is going to have a new look, and they've got some new players. Both teams are very well coached, but, I think this is going to be one of these teams that we look back. Does Bishop Moore do they – I think it's an upset if Bishop Moore wins this game, but – again, I look at this being a very competitive game.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, but I'm definitely going Edgewater here, and I don't think it's close. I think Edgewater wins by 21+.
Now, this is a season opener that is always interesting. Apopka travels to Ocoee, and this has been a very close rivalry for the last several years.
Yeah, this has been an intriguing matchup, and it's only been a rivalry because – the way Apopka comes out in this first game, it seems like every year they find themselves either down 14-0 or 13-0 against this Ocoee football team, and then they squeak it out and they always win by 1 point, whether it's a missed extra point or something crazy happens at the end of the football game. Is this the year that Ocoee finally gets it done? I don't think so. Dan, what are your thoughts on this? I know Apopka has a statement to make. They barely squeaked it out by 1 point to Osceola in the Kickoff Classic, but now it counts. Can Ocoee finally get over the edge here? They looked decent against Oak Ridge last week in the Kickoff Classic, but I just think Apopka's too strong. What do you think? This is your alma mater now, Dan, so no biased comments here, but we know.
Honestly, first-year head coach Buck Gurley is fine-tuning this program. He's doing it his way, and I know this is a statement game for the Ocoee Knights. So, is this year that the Ocoee upsets Apopka? We're going to wait and see.
I don't believe so.
All right, Dr. Phillips travels over to Lake Mary to take on the Rams, Baylin.
This is a game I'm very intrigued about, obviously, for a lot of reasons here. Lake Mary, obviously, what can we say about Noah Grubbs? Sorry, my dogs are getting excited about this. I'm very excited about this matchup. Obviously, Noah Grubbs, he's coming in hot, the phenom quarterback. So what he's going to have to do against to stop, DP's going to have to stop him. And I believe Coach Rodney Wells is going to have this defense coached up really well and get them ready, excited about the kickoff of this season. I think they have a lot of high expectations. Coach Sapp is, taking over the entire season as the offensive coordinator. So look for Stanley Anderson to have a breakout game as well. He's a phenom junior quarterback as well that a lot of people are sleeping on. So be mindful about his talent and watch him perform this year. But I believe Lake Mary Rams, they make a statement this football game. I believe they win, and I believe they win soundly. And Noah Grubbs and the entire staff, they start their season the right way, hopefully competing for a state title along with Apopka and Seminole in that same district. But again, DP looks like a different football team, and I'm excited to see Coach Sapp and what he does offensively with that football program. But Lake Mary with Harshberger, that's the UNC commit at La Crosse. You got Logan Cook, who just committed. He's a receiver, former quarterback. He's a special talent. And that defense is young. They returned, I believe, 8 starters from last year's crazy defense. So I'm excited. I know they're a little small up front, but those guys get after it. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, but I do think Lake Mary Rams takes this game home.
All right. And finally, we got Wekiva traveling to Olympia. We get to see some talent on both sides of the ball in this game.
Yeah, this is, again, everybody wants to see this matchup. It's a top 10 matchup. Wekiva, obviously, with Tyree Davis, we just talked about early in the segment. Special talent at quarterback. He's been lighting it up the last 2 games. 300 yards, 400 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. I mean, the kid is just playing elite football right now. So Olympia, A lot of hype around this program. They got a lot of transfers. Can they get it together? Did not look really that impressive last week against Boone. They did win 14-0. Let's see what they can do against a really solid Wekiva football team. And I believe this is going to be an upset here. I believe Wekiva is going to beat Olympia in this matchup. Again, I believe Olympia is a solid football team, which is why they're in our top 10. I just don't see them beating Wekiva, who's right now rolling offensively, and I believe they get it done. Dan, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a game that is going to showcase some of this talent. You take a look at Wekiva. Sincere Edwards is going to play on both sides of the ball. Was it Tyree Davis, quarterback for Wekiva, big, strong-arm kid. We saw a lot of great things from him in the spring. But Olympia, Coach Travis Gabriel has, everybody's been talking about the transfers. He had a solid team coming into this before the Mello brothers came over, a couple of the offensive line. I think it's going to be very interesting with a kid like Joshua Evans. How do you get all the talent in the ball? I think Olympia is going to be that team that we're going to be talking about late into this season. They might be the Diacoe from last year, Baylin.
Well, that'd be great, and they better, because there's a lot of hype around this football team. I think Juan Gaines is another quarterback that's an elite talent. They got special talent everywhere, like you just mentioned. Even without the transfers, they just made that team even better. I just want to see what that chemistry looks like over the course of the season. This is a great first matchup to really see where they stand coming off that Boone victory. But like I said, Wekiva is a special football team. They might have one of those special seasons. They also could be the Diacoe from last year. So we're just going to see how this all plays out.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to get ready for this week 1 kickoff. Where are you going to be on Friday night?
I'll be at that Tigers game. Jones Tigers versus Cocoa. Go Tigers. Yeah,
I tell you, that's going to be very, very interesting to watch. And, I'm going to be at that Jones Cocoa game as well. I think it's going to be the game for week 1. But again, looking at the schedule, we've got some really big games this season. And we look at our top 10, I think it's going to be shifting around quite a bit as we start seeing these matchups. Well, I want to give a big thanks to the Influencer Council for sponsoring tonight's show. Check them out, www.influencer.council for all NIL questions, things about NIL. Well, Baylin, that is it for week 1. We're going to kick this thing back and get ready for next week. We'll be back every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock right here on the YouTube channel. So we will see you then.
Shout out to Big Hits Live for the sponsor as well. Be sure to check them out. They might be on a sideline near you. So stay tuned for those photos, drops, and all the highlights, because they're the real deal. Appreciate their sponsorship as well, Dan. So thank you for a great show. This is week 1 of the High School Football Scoreboard show, and it's going to be a great year, Dan. I'm looking forward to it.
Heath Ziegler, we're making you proud, buddy.